Hello there friends and welcome. For today's BG3 guide we have at long last my very first Sorcadin build, a Paladin Sorcerer Multiclass combination. You'll of course get to achieve extremely powerful smites even early, for very nice one-shots, many attacks per round and the ability to casting heavy armor from your Paladin side, while your Sorcerer side will further enhance your smites with a lot more uses before having to rest, including the ability to generate more slots for them, with the addition of some extra spell support. So without further ado, let us get into our Sorcadin build guide, first with character creation. For race, it's the same choices as always for melee characters: Wood Elf or Wood Half-Elf for higher movement speed, Half-Orc for higher criticals, Githyanki for higher skills, and even Gnome, so that you can tank enemy crowd control effects. For class, we'll of course be going with a Paladin and Sorcerer Multiclass combination. I'd rather start as a Paladin so that you get your smites as early as possible, plus of course the ability to cast spells even with heavy armor and shields. For your Paladin subclass, my preferred pick is Oath of Vengeance. You get not only an ability to empower your damage even further per strike, later even free advantage on your attacks. For your ability points, sadly we cannot go all out into Charisma unlike a Paladin Warlock multiclass combo. Therefore, you still need to invest points into Strength to actually increase your damage and attack rolls. Yes, you can rely on the elixirs that set your strength to high amounts, you can farm them as, well, even as early as the first chapter. But I'd rather the elixir of Bloodlust for more actions, which of course means more attacks. So what you can do is start with 17 strength by assigning a +2, it will become 18 as early as chapter 1 by defeating the Hag boss. Then either 14 charisma or 16 depending on what you prefer. It's just that if you go with 14 charisma, you can also get 14 constitution and let's say 10 wisdom. But if you want 16 charisma instead, you'll have to dump your constitution or dexterity. Since you can wield heavy armor, you might not care much for dexterity anyways, it's just for initiative purposes. But you have other ways of overcoming this limitation, such as armor and feats. For your skills, go with first athletics, to resist being pushed and shoved around, and since we have high charisma, also intimidation, and as far as persuasion, you'll get it for free through the guild artisan background as always, including insight, another commonly used skill check in dialogue. Right at the second level we'll get our very powerful smites. Remember, you can set them as a reaction, either on normal hits or also criticals. For the fighting style we want as high damage as possible, so great weapon fighting. For the Paladin spells it's all about support, so mostly Divine Favor, Shield of Faith, Protection from Evil and Good, Bless and Heroism. Very early, because you won't have that many uses for your bonus actions, you can also choose one of the special smites like Searing Smite or Thunderous and Wrathful Smite. Now from the third level onwards, you have two ways of progressing this build. You can go all out into Sorcerer now, which provides you with a lot more spell slots and more powerful Sorcerer spells. But at that point you're mostly a Sorcerer with some smites. I'd rather keep our character a Paladin until around level 5, because it's when we get the second attack per action, which of course matters a lot, because well, it means more smites. You'll still get all the extra spell slots for more smites through Sorcerer later on anyways. As an Oath of Vengeance Paladin, this is also when you get the Vow of Amenity ability. It's quite busted because if you target yourself with this, you'll get free advantage against all enemies. It's silly, but hey, it still works, even as far as the latest patch number 5. Plus it's just a bonus action. For your feat at level 4 you also have two options. Great Weapon Master if you want as high damage as possible because you'll be going two-handed with a huge great sword. The melee penalty to attack rolls doesn't matter, I mean you have Vow of Amenity, you have sources of advantage, attack roll buffs and so on to make up for that. Alert is also another very nice pick because this character, as you might have noticed, has very low dexterity, only 10, which means we don't get any initiative bonuses at all. Without Alert, chances are you will act after a lot of enemies, which is disappointing for a SMITER build because, well, you kinda want to one-shot them with your smites first. Since we already deal high enough damage with your smites, I'd rather go for Alert first and pick Great Weapon Master later, but the choice is up to you. Level 5 is when we get the second attack per action, very good because it means more smites, and of course more Paladin spells. But honestly, you're just using the slots for more smites. Level 6 onwards is when I would start progression as a sorcerer once again for more spell slots, which means more smites per rest. Your cantrips don't matter much, I mean you might as well just pick the ones for utility and buffing, especially Blade Ward, Friends, Light, might as well go with Minor Illusion and Mage Hand as well if you want. For spells, mostly shield for extra defenses because like I said, you're just using the sorcerer slots, which stack with your paladin ones, for more smites. But enhanced sleep can also help. For the subclass, Dragon Bloodline is my preferred pick, because at the very least you'll have an extra hit point per level. And for your Dragon Ancestor, White is the best one because it's the only one that does something really unique, as you get access to the armor of Agathis spell. By default, it's a Warlock only spell, and well, the effect is quite good as well. It can provide you with a lot of extra temporary hit points and even retaliate the enemies back with cold damage, all scaling with spell slot level. Any other spells at level 7? For your meta magic, unfortunately, it doesn't really matter for a paladin because they just won't work with your smites, which is what you want, to spam every single attack every round. So you can truly pick whatever you want here, such as let's say Twin Spell and Extended Spell for some buffs. For level 8, we have second level spells, ideally Mirror Image for higher AC or Blur for disadvantage on enemy attacks, also for extra defenses. It's just that Blur requires concentration, Mirror Image does not. For more meta magic, like I said, it kinda doesn't matter. Quicken, for example, will not work with your smites. Ideally, you just want to use the sorcery points you have to create more spell slots, which of course means more smites. So pick whatever you want. Heightened at least can help with some crowd control spells if you want to use them later, but I'd rather just Might. Any other cantrip at level 9, and also any other second level spell like Blur. For our feat, well, either Alert or Great Weapon Master if you didn't pick it before. For level 3 spells at level 10, you can go with Haste of course, it's just that at this point chances are you already have someone else that can cast it for you, or you can just rely on potions. There's also crowd control ones like Hypnotic Pattern and Slow, but I'd rather just counterspell, because at least you can use this as a reaction to prevent enemy spells, and for the rest it's just smites. For more spells at level 11, anything you want to be fair. And level 12 at last means our first level 4 spells, you might as well just go with Greater Invisibility. Sadly we don't get another feat, but as far as increasing your strength further, you have a potion and you also have gloves during chapter 3. Alright, now let us cover gear for our Paladin Sorcerer SMITER build. For the helmet slot, as early as Act 1, you can always go with Haste Helmet for higher movement speed, but for this build in particular, the Diadem of Arcane Synergy is also a great choice. After all, you'll always be able to inflict an extra +3 extra damage from your Charisma modifier on all attacks. For the second chapter, however, you might prefer to go with Dark Justiciar or the Covert Call for higher critical chance, or just keep to Arcane Synergy. But ultimately, during chapter 3, as always, Saravok's Horn Helmet for higher critical range. For cloaks, it doesn't matter that much for this build, just a classic Cloak of Protection for higher AC and saves, or the Cloak of Displacement also for higher defenses. For armor, as we can equip heavy armor as early as Act 1 and also cast spells in it, ideally for the first and second chapters, the classic Adamantine Splint armor, but for the third act you have two options. Helldusk as usual, as it is the highest AC heavy armor in the game, but it doesn't quite fit a paladin looks wise. I feel it's better for a Black Guard type of character. But anyways, you can equip it just fine, or go with the Armor of Persistence that you can find even earlier, also Act 3, by just buying it from a merchant. It has one less point of AC, but looks great for a Divine Holy Warrior type, and even grants you permanent versions of both the Resistance spell for higher saving throws, but most importantly, Blade Ward for full physical damage resistance, that's half damage taken. For gloves, for the first act, as always, Growling Underdog for free advantage, but with this build you can also use your Vow of Enmity Oath ability to get advantage on enemies. It's just that Underdog is pretty much permanent. The other ability has few uses per rest. During the second act, as always, you can upgrade it into Dark Justiciar for extra necrotic damage on hit, or just keep to Growling Underdog. But for the final act, I'd rather the Gloves of Giant Strength to set your strength to 23, as we can't really afford increases instead of feats. And yes, you can of course respec the strength points into whatever you want, such as dexterity or charisma after getting these gloves. For amulets, as always, Broodmother's Revenge for the highest damage on hit, or later you can go with the classic Greater Health Amulet for the highest hit points. And as far as rings for Act 1, Crusher's Ring for higher movement speed, plus either the Caustic Band or the Strange Conduit Ring. For the second act, however, definitely the Risky Ring for free advantage, and also Callous Glow for higher damage. Now let us cover weapons and consumables. As we'll be going two-handed with a huge greatsword, ideally for the first and second act, as always, Jorgoral's Greatsword, first for its unique Colossal Onslaught Cleave ability for hitting multiple enemies with your attacks, and of course it still retains access to the normal cleave for the same purpose. But ultimately, as always for any two-handed, you absolutely want Balduran's Giant Slayer for the highest damage boost possible. And as far as ranged weapons, you don't need them to attack, so mostly for passives. For the first and second acts, as always, the Bow of Awareness for higher initiative, and for Act 3, either that shot if you want higher critical range, or the Hellrider Longbow for +3 initiative. For consumables, it's pretty much always the same. You absolutely want the Elixir of Bloodlust. After all, it means even more smites per turn and lasts until long rest. Well, alright friends, so this was it for my Paladin Sorcerer Multiclass SMITER guide. If you found it useful, as always, please remember to like, subscribe, and also consider becoming a channel member if you can. As always, I appreciate your support. Thank you for watching, and see you next time, friends.